Okay, Titus chapter 1. I think most of my audience is at the back. Hannah and Jesse, you guys are fine. Everyone behind Hannah and Jesse that's under 20, see if you can find a seat closer up. Someone can take my chair right there. It's all right. Oh, class just grew by quite a bit. There's 2 up here. Zara doesn't bite very hard. Oh, we got lots of all right, thank you all. Makes it easier to pass out the test at the end. Okay, so we're going to take a look at these verses that Brother Chris read out for us in Titus chapter 1. So if you've got a Bible, open it up to Titus 1. If you don't, listen really careful. Okay, we're going to take a look at the first 2 verses of Titus 1 and the last 2 verses of Titus 1. Now, when I was in school, sometimes the teacher just gave us way too much to read for homework. And if I had too much to read, I would go through and I'd do this little trick where I would just read the first sentence of the paragraph and then the last sentence of the paragraph. Get through my reading. And it worked pretty good with things that didn't matter very much, like someone's rant on a political idea or some historical speculation or something like that. You get the main idea from it. But that's not a really good idea for Bible study, is it? Because most of the times when you read a book, the most important stuff is in the first part of the paragraph and the last part of the paragraph. But what about with the Scriptures? Where's the important bit? Well, it's all through, isn't it? Not anything you can skip without missing something important. Right? It's all important stuff. Yeah, exactly. So, that's not what we're doing with Titus 1. We read all of Titus 1 yesterday, didn't we? Yeah. And we actually had a talk on all of Titus 1 yesterday. Okay, so what we're going to do then is just focus on these 4 verses of it. And hopefully there's a big lesson that comes out of it for all of us that we can remember. Okay? Okay, we'll do this sort of like a Sunday school class. Brother Chris warned you it was going to be like a Sunday school class, didn't he? Okay, so I want some input from basically everyone that I asked to move up here. Everyone under 20. You two included. Even though you didn't have to move up. Okay, so that gives us a few different perspectives to consider, doesn't it? Because if Carice has an answer for us, and Riley has an answer for us, and Angela has an answer for us, they're all thinking from different perspectives, aren't they? And usually there's something to gain from each of those perspectives. So, we'll try to give the best comments that you can, or the best answers that you can, based on your age or your knowledge level. And we'll try to think about each of those perspectives. Okay, first question. This book of Titus, how did it come about? Why or how was it written? Do you remember? Yes? Emily?
Paul wrote it as Titus, to Titus.
Yes, Paul wrote it to Titus. So what was it? Was it a book? Was it a
book.
Story? This is a book of the Bible. Good. And the book? A letter. Somebody said it. Who said it? I heard someone say letter. Letter, exactly. It was a letter. Okay, from Paul. When you write a letter, you do this, right? From Paul to Titus. Ooh. Hey, that was an exciting question. Okay, so what's the letter? And so let's say you're Paul, okay, and you're going to write a letter to this really good friend of yours. He's a younger friend. He's your brother in Christ, named Titus. How do you start out this letter? Dear Titus. What do you think? Dear Titus. What if he's a really good friend? Dearest Titus. What's that? Dearest? Very good. Dearest Titus. Or maybe you say, hey Titus, hope you're doing all right. been a while since I saw you. No, that's not how Paul started it, was it? Who's got Titus 1 verses 1 and 2? Can you read that for us? Awesome.
Paul, servant of God and an apostle of Jesus Christ, according to the faith of God's elect, and the acknowledging of the truth which is after godliness. Let me keep reading.
Yep.
In hope of eternal life, which God that cannot lie promised before the world began.
Okay, that's good. So this is interesting. Paul, a servant of God, an apostle of Jesus Christ, according to the faith of God's elect, etc., etc. This is his dear John, right? He didn't say dear Titus. He said Paul, servant of God, apostle of Jesus Christ, according to the faith of God's elect. So he's introducing himself. He's the writer, right? He's telling Titus who this is, writing a letter to him. We usually put that at the end of the letter, don't we? We say, love Chris. Right? At the end of the letter. And then you know, that's not how you sign your letters off, Chris? Didn't they know who wrote the letter, right? And if you want to know who the letter's from, you need to look at the envelope, we look at the very end. But that's not how they did it then. Okay, so Paul tells him right from the beginning, this is who I am. I'm Paul, but he says he's Paul and he's God's servant. And he's Christ's apostle. And he gives the reason he's a servant and an apostle. According to the faith of God's elect and the acknowledging of the truth which is after godliness. Now, what does this mean, God's elect? What does it mean, God, when he says faith of God's elect?
Elect.
Elect. He means elect. He means what he says. Yes, another word?
God picked him.
The people that God picked, actually, yes. So he's not actually saying that God picked him when he says the faith of God's elect. He means everyone that God has picked. Very good. Anyone got another answer? Might want to go into that in more detail. From the older ones? More in-depth answer? Okay, so she says the picked ones. And that's a pretty good word, actually. We might also use the word saints. That's what Paul uses in some of his other epistles when he talks about the righteous, or those who are in Christ. We might say the righteous. Okay, so he's saying, I'm an apostle and a servant of God because of the faith of the righteous. Okay, the same faith that all of those in Christ have. Okay. He also says, so he's referring to this faith that's shared, isn't he? That all the brothers and sisters have, the faith of God's elect. All the brothers and sisters share this truth. And he also mentions the acknowledging of the truth. If you look in a lexicon, which is kind of like an encyclopedia, he says that the word acknowledging means a precise and correct knowledge. Precise and correct knowledge of the truth. So what Paul is referring to is a common belief based on a precise knowledge of the truth, isn't he? That's what we're getting here, isn't it? According to the faith of righteousness and the acknowledging of the truth, which is after godliness. Or the ISV version, if you got that, says, which leads to godliness. So you have this faith built on knowledge that leads to godliness. Okay? Leads us to doing things God's way. But those are pretty big thoughts. Paul's already talked about having faith in God, about understanding the truth, about living in a godly way. And we're still in verse 1. This is the way he introduces his letter. Pretty good way, isn't it? And verse 2 starts out, in hope, we've got another idea here, in hope of eternal life. But why is he mentioning all of these things right in his introduction? It's better than Dear John, isn't it? Or Dear Titus. Okay. But why mention these things right away? Any ideas? Yes, Colton.
That's the things that he wanted him to remember.
Yes. These are the things that he wants Titus to be thinking about and remember. Okay? Anything else? So he mentions these first because they're really important. That's what you said? Colton agrees. Now what else? Any other ideas why he would mention these things in his introduction, in the part where he says, basically from Paul? He says, I'm Paul writing you this, and he gives this explanation. of the things that he and Titus share. I think that's it right there, that he and Titus share. Okay? He's talking about the bond between him and Titus. Okay? Him and Titus shared faith, knowledge, their actions or character, the godliness, and they shared their hope. So what do we call that? When two people or several people share faith, knowledge, character, and hope. What do we call that? Having these things in common. What do we call that? Starts with F. You have faith and knowledge and action all the same. Yes, Emily?
Friendship.
Friendship is very close.
Fellowship.
Fellowship. What does it mean, fellowship? I'm going to give me a practical example, a very practical example of fellowship. When we talk about fellowship, we usually talking about fellowship around the truth, but maybe there's a practical example of people sharing a common goal and a common knowledge and working towards something that you can think of. I like to call it a model of fellowship. Any examples? Can you guys think of something, Hannah or Jesse? Riley? No? I thought Riley was going to tell us about how one person pushes the bush and the other person waits on the other side for the deer to come out. And they're working together, aren't they? They've got a common goal. Let's put some meat in the freezer. Let's work together and do this. We both know how deer act. We know there's a deer in this bush. We know if we flush him out from one side, he's going to come out the other. We can be there ready for him, right? There's two people working together then, isn't there? They have common goal, common knowledge, common faith or hope, right? So that's a very practical, you might say, or a model of fellowship. Not fellowship around the truth, but fellowship around another activity. Okay? Any other ideas about practical examples of fellowship? Anyone? Any ideas about someone working together with a common goal and faith and common actions? Who was at the Bishop gathering last year? Oh, yeah, pretty much everybody. Good. Yes, there was this team challenge, wasn't there? This was the winning team. They had to pull Regan and his truck. What, about 30 feet? 50 feet maybe? I think it was a full 50 feet. As quickly as they could. They're on to the stopwatch, right? Okay, so everyone figure out your game plan. When you're ready to start, you tell Zara, I had the stopwatch. Tell Zara. She says go. The clock is ticking, and until it crosses the line, the clock is still ticking. Right? Okay. And at the end, you get time. This team did it in 26 seconds. That was our fastest time. Was it 27? Oh, y'all did it in 27, right? Yes. We had a close second. We had a very distant last place. The last place team did it in 2 minutes and 36 seconds. I don't have a photo of that team. Save the reputations. However, what do you notice about this picture? Other than Regan, everyone has their backs into the work, don't they? They're pulling. You can tell by how they're leaning into that rope, can't you? Okay? And they actually organized where they had the strongest pullers towards the front and the less strong towards the back. So Emily looks like she's pulling most of the weight there. But this is how they organized to start with. Okay? And so that if one in front slipped or fell, the next person behind them could pick them back up and they could continue pulling, right? And they had this game plan where they all knew what was going on. They knew, right? They knew we're all in this together. This is the rope. There's the truck. There's the finish line. They had a common knowledge, didn't they? They had a common goal. The goal is bring that truck across the finish line. They could all see that happening in their mind, right? We know This is the goal. This is how we're going to do it. Okay? So they have what we would call common knowledge and a common faith. Okay? Or hope. Okay? And what was the other thing that we talked about there that Paul and Titus shared? In the verse, it uses the term godliness, leads unto godliness. Okay, that's our actions or our character. The things that we're doing are godly. Okay, and in this case, the things that they are doing, well, they may be godly in a sense, but the things that they were doing led towards that goal, and they resonated or they reflected their common knowledge and their common goal. Okay? They're acting in accordance with that, right? And so you get this, actually a model, quite a good model, I think, of fellowship here. They're all working together. They all have a common knowledge and a common faith. Now, however, what about the 2 minute and 36 second team? How could it take them over 5 times as long to do the same thing?
They had lots of weak little
Maybe they had lots of weak little people. That's an idea. But actually, I remember this team. They didn't. They had lots of young, strong boys.
Oh,
Yes.
It's not Chris, it's Christopher.
Okay. Anybody else have an idea why?
Regan stepped on the brake.
I heard that during the pulling. We said, all right, y'all, get your plan together and tell us when you're ready to start. Okay, well, this is going to pull the truck. Okay, I think we're ready to start. Okay. Well, you're not touching the rope yet. Are you sure you're ready to start? No, hold on. No, we should go and grab the rope first. Okay, everyone grab the rope. There, everyone's on the rope. I think we're good.
That's a rope.
Did they have a common knowledge?
No.
Some of them didn't know when they were starting or when they were finishing. Okay? They had a vague idea of what was going on. Okay? They didn't fully understand, but they didn't make that preparation to make sure, are we all on the same page here? Are we all on the same playing field here? And so, start the time. All right, go guys. And they all pull really fast. They say, it didn't move. And somebody says, I think Regan's still on the brake. And what did they do when they said, I think Regan's still on the brake?
He stopped.
Stop pulling. He was like this, and then he said, hey. He's standing straight up now, isn't he? He's not pulling anymore. I think Regan's on the brake. And then you know what everybody else did? Oh! They all stopped pulling.
Oh.
Well, now who's pulling? Nobody's pulling. But you know what? They found out Regan wasn't on the brake. You know why? Because the truck started rolling backwards. Whoa! He's on the brake. And everyone's trying to get their place back, and everyone's trying to get the rope back, and now they're trying to pull, but it's pulling them backwards. Because it takes a little while for the truck to stop. I don't think we can do this, guys. Stop pulling again. As soon as one person stopped pulling, all the rest of them said, let's figure this out. We'll stop pulling for a while and figure this out. Now they're not working together. They don't have a common knowledge. And they've lost their common goal. I don't know if we can do this. Now their focus is shifted from the goal to this problem that's in front of them, right? And soon the truck was rolling backwards again. I finally said, well, guys, the clock doesn't stop until you cross the finish line. Okay, and then they kind of figured things out and finally got themselves a common goal, and they struggled through it, and they finally did get through. 2 minutes and 36 seconds. A lot of work. Because there was this confusion. This was a model of a breakdown in fellowship. When you lose your common knowledge, or you don't even start with a common knowledge, you lose this focus on the goal, and you lose your action and character. Godliness has fallen out because you're not doing the things that are in line with that goal that you have. Okay. So we talked about that. That's the only picture I have for y'all. So there's this faith, knowledge, action, and hope that are all talked about by Paul and Titus. Now they're working together not to pull a truck, but what? You want to remember from the talks this weekend what the goal was here, Emily?
To teach the truth.
To teach the truth. Okay? Where was Titus? Does anyone remember where Titus was when Paul writes to him? Chris, do you remember where Titus was? Yes. Crete.
There you go.
Crete, exactly. The island of Crete. And they're trying to, what they were hoping to do was encourage the ecclesia there, to lift them up, because they were having some pretty hard times. They had people that were saying, I think he's on the brakes. Right? And they had people that weren't pulling at all. They were standing by the side. Okay? This ecclesia had problems, right? And the truck was rolling backwards. And Paul and Titus are trying to figure out how do we get this ecclesia to work together. Get that common knowledge back, that common goal back, and get people acting like they have a common goal so that we can move forward again. Okay? So, when Paul writes to Titus, the first thing he reminds him of is we have this commonality, this fellowship. I'm writing to you on the basis of this wonderful fellowship we have. Now, how do we sign off our letters? Let's say I was writing a letter to a brother let's say I'm writing a letter to a brother in Texas, or to an ecclesia in Texas, and how might I sign it off at the end? I could put love, London, right? But what else might I put? Do we know what a lot of the ecclesial letters are signed off as? From, well, not usually put from at the end. Hey, what do y'all think at the end of that letter? How are we going to sign it off?
It's shop. It's shop.
What do y'all think? Someone we haven't heard from yet. How do you sign off a letter?
A letter. A letter. Sincerely?
Sincerely? That's one way, okay. Sincerely means you put your heart into it, right? Okay, and we might do that to anyone, right? But what if it's someone we're in fellowship with? How might we put it? In anyone. What are some examples of the way y'all, the brothers and sisters sign off the letter? Yes?
Love in the truth.
Love in the truth. Love in the truth. No, I see a word a lot of times at the end of a letter when it's signed off. Bond. Someone give me an example of how the word bond would be used in signing off a letter.
In the bonds we share.
In the bonds we share. In the bonds we share.
Yeah.
Can you sign off your name? Yeah, Colton, you have anything? Love in Christ, yeah. So that's very similar to love in the truth, isn't it? Yeah. Love in Christ or love in the truth we could put here, or Christ we could put here. Whoops. I forgot how to write. Okay. But do you see something common here? What does a bond mean? What is a bond?
Set.
A set? It's what holds a set together. Very good. Yeah. Okay, so like if you had a bunch of straws or a bunch of pieces of wheat and you put a rubber band around them, we'd call that a bond, wouldn't we? Or when you break your glasses and you put some super glue on it and stick them back together, that's a bond, right? Okay. This bond, or this sharing, or this common, or this connection is what we're talking about, isn't it? So Paul didn't finish his letter with that so much as he started his letter with that. He said, in the bonds of the truth, I come to you. In the fellowship of the truth, I come to you. Okay? And we sign off at the end of our letter sometimes like that. Yes, Emily?
Maybe you sign it off, grace be with you, amen.
Very good. Grace be with you, amen. Yes. And that was the way he signed it off at the end, wasn't it? Okay? But we got to do ours backwards of what he did, because we tell them first, we say, dear so-and-so, and they already know who we are because it's on the outside of the envelope, and then we sign it off in the bonds of the truth to remind them at the end while we're writing. But he did it backwards of that. Maybe we do it backwards of the way he did it. In the bonds of the truth, and then he blesses him at the end, grace be with you. Very good. Okay. But we haven't looked at quite at all of verse 2 yet still. What else does verse 2 say? What part are we missing there? We said in hope of eternal life. How's the rest of it go? Henny, you got it? Yeah.
God that eternal, or that cannot lie, promised before the world began.
Okay, which God that cannot lie promised before the world began. This is a statement that their fellowship is founded on a rock. It's solid. Okay? Which God that cannot lie promised before the world even began. Okay? There's a very special relationship Paul and Titus had there. Now, what does this all have to do with the last two verses of the chapter? Established now that there's this connection between knowledge, faith, works, hope. And the last two verses talk about how important it is to keep all of those things functioning. Just like all those people pulling at that truck. You've got to keep everything in line. Your knowledge, your faith or your goal, and your actions. Pick and read verse 15 and 16 for us. Someone we haven't heard from yet. Jesse? Have you got Titus 1, verse 15 and 16? Okay, can you read it out for us?
And unto them that hear all things are here, but unto them that are defiled and unbelieving is nothing here. But
Okay.
even
Oh, sorry. Yeah, carry on.
but even their mind and conscience is defiled. They confess that they know God, but in works they deny him, being vulnerable and disobedient, and unto every good work reprobate.
Very good. Thank you, Jesse. Okay, so see how Paul's still talking here about belief and works. Okay, let's think of our truck full example. What's the belief? What's the commonality of belief here? How is that being illustrated in the truck full example? What does everyone believe that's the same? What does everyone know that's the same? There's the truck. There's the line. We've got to get it across, right? And also know we're only going to get there by pulling ourselves, right? By working together. Okay? So then, don't stop. Exactly. So how does that act itself out? What are people doing because they believe that? They're all pulling, aren't they? And they're going to keep pulling until they get across. Okay? So this is belief and works, and they're bound up in each other, aren't they? If you really know that's what you got to do, you'll be doing it, right? Okay. However, Paul uses the phrase, he says they profess that they know God, but in works they deny Him. Or we might say they know God, but the things that they do contradict themselves. So let's say I love peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Someone makes me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then I throw it in the trash can. Does that make sense? I thought you said you really liked them. Then you threw it away. Doesn't make sense, right? That's like saying, I believe in God, but then you don't do the things that are consistent with that, right? That's what he's warning against. Okay? So would you say that was a true belief? Someone says they believe in God, but they don't actually do those things. Would you say that's a true belief? No, of course not. Why is that? If you believe, will it show in the things that you do? Yes, for sure. Yeah. So real faith is something that you act on, isn't it? And like Paul said in his opening words, it leads to godliness. In other words, it brings about godly actions out of you. What about works without belief? That's a little odd, isn't it? Works, in other words, you're doing what's right, but you don't believe what's right. Can someone give me an example of that? You want to think of an example? Why would you ever do something without believing in it? Homework? Sometimes we do homework just because we have to, right? Not because we think we're actually learning something from it. Yeah. Any other examples you think of? And sometimes we just do things just because we're following the rules, right? I don't really believe in the rules. I think it's stupid, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay? I haven't really stopped to think and to consider the source or the reason for those rules. Right? We're just following the rules blindly. I do it because I have to. But you haven't stopped to think about why is that important? Why is that rule there? Okay? Christ talked to the Pharisees. They had a problem like this. They followed the rules, but they didn't think about the reason for the rules. Okay? The Pharisees and the scribes asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples walk according to the traditions of the elders? You're eating your bread without washing your hands the way that you're supposed to wash your hands ceremonially." Okay? He answered and said unto them, "Well hath Isaiah the prophet spoken of you. He prophesied of you hypocrites, as it is written, this people honors me with their lips." I believe in God. Honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. Okay, so he's saying, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, but your heart's not in it. This is stupid, but I'll do it anyway. Right? Christ says the scribes and the Pharisees were careful to keep all the traditions, keep all the rules. that were handed down to them based on the law of Moses, but they had lost a care for God Himself. They weren't acknowledging Him. They were trying to have works without believing. Okay? Christ says that they worship God in vain. What does that mean? In vain. You know what the word vain means? Somebody knows what vain means? What do you think, Gold? You know? Austin? Help him out.
Basically, it's like worthless.
Worthless. Worthless is a really good definition. Emily, you got another?
It's mostly inside your body.
V-E-I-N, vain, is a part of your body, yes? Okay, this vein is V-A-I-N. Okay? Yeah, they worshipped Him in vain. That means they worshipped Him for nothing. It was worthless. It wasn't doing anything. Okay? You're not making God happy if you're saying, well, the rules are dumb, but I'll do it anyway. Or if you don't even think about the person that made the rules, you just say, well, it's the rule. I'll do it because it's the rule. Okay? That's not how you do things for your friends, is it? You do something for your friend's birthday, you make them a nice card and all. You're excited about making it for them, aren't you? But you know that person, you're thinking about the person behind it and doing it. Okay? So, you see, we must truly believe in God and obey Him correctly, right? But what does that mean to believe in God? Is it something that we do with our bodies? Is it something we do with our minds? To believe something, what is that? Mind or your muscle? Yes, Emily?
Mind.
The mind? What do you think, Jeremy? Yeah, mind. Agree? Yes. We believe something with our minds, okay? So what does that mean? If we want to believe in God, we know it's going to show itself in the things that we do once we believe. But if we want to believe in God, what's it going to take? Minds, isn't it? We have to think. That's what we do with our minds. We think. It requires us to think about God. About what God can do. Okay? What His abilities are. And we develop this belief by reading the Scriptures, by reading the stories in the Scriptures, and thinking about them. Okay? When we really stop and we really think about the stories of the Scriptures, we realize the implications of those stories or what those stories mean, what they're saying, then we can develop a really solid belief in God. Because He's the one that made those stories happen, those events take place. Okay? The parting of the Red Sea so that the waters were a wall to them on both sides. Can you imagine? We read the story, right? We've all read the story. If we stop and think about this, the Red Sea parting so that the waters were a wall to them on both sides. The fire coming down and consuming Elijah's offering and the altar and the water around it and the rocks and the dirt. When we think about everyone's speech all of a sudden being confused at the Tower of Babel. And we read about these things, right? But you have to think about them as well in order for it to develop our belief. Okay? And no one can think about these things for you. Can anyone think about something for you? No. Because it's your brain, isn't it? You've got to think about it for yourself. Okay? We can encourage you. Your parents or brothers and sisters, your Sunday school teachers will encourage you. We'll read these things to you. We'll ask you questions about them because we're trying to get you to think about them. But in the end, it has to be you that actually thinks about them. We encourage you to, but in the end, it's your responsibility. If you think about these things, this really happened. How does it apply to my life? If you think about that for yourself, then that's how you develop a belief in God. Okay. All right, so I think we'll wrap it up there. But let's review first before we finish up here. Let's review. What have we talked about so far? What book? Yes? Titus was the book, yes? From Paul to Titus. It was a letter. We talked about that, right? What did they share? What did Paul and Titus share? Yes? Fellowship. Very good, Angela. And what did this fellowship consist of? Someone give me some. That starts with an F. What did they have? Yes, Jim. Faith was one. They had a common faith. What was that based on? Knowledge. Very good, Angela. They had faith and they had knowledge. That's what it was based on. And were they acting in a way that represented that or showed that? Or were they acting like they didn't have faith? Yes? Like they did. So they had knowledge, faith, and action. Okay? They were all being shared by them, and those constitute fellowship. Okay, very good. Very good. Was that, did Paul say that hope was really solid, or something that might come and go? How solid was it? One of you older ones, do you remember the phrase that he used there? Some of the phrases that he used there? He said it was really solid, didn't he? How was it solid? Who made the promise? Who made the promise? Their faith was based off. God did. Can God lie? No. There's two things that are really solid right there, isn't it? Three, actually. It was a promise. God made it. And God can't lie. And when did He make it? When did Paul say He made that promise? Yes. Oh, very good, Angela. Before the world even began. So you got like rock, right? They're all solid. And that's what that fellowship was built on. Okay? Now, can you really have belief without works? If you have belief, is it going to show itself? You don't think so? If I really believe I can get that truck across the finish line, will I do something about it? Yeah, what if I don't really believe I can? What if I think Regan's sitting on the brakes? Will I be doing something? No, I'll stop. Because my belief, my works, show my faith, don't they? My belief. If I believe we can, we'll be working towards it. If I believe we can't, I'll stop working towards it. Okay? So really, belief and works work together, don't they? What about if I'm just doing something but I don't really believe in it? Is that pleasing to God? No. Okay, and how do we develop that belief? How can we develop our belief in God? Yes, Stephanie? Reading the Bible, and we have to do as we read it. Yes, Colton? Believe it, yeah. How do we believe it, though? Yes. Yeah, you got to have that knowledge and you got to think on it, right? So sometimes we read something, it might only take 15 minutes to read, but then you think about it the rest of the day, right? You hear a cool story, and then the next time you know, you're pretending it out, right? Asparagus licorice. Yeah, you're acting it out because you know the story, and you're thinking about it the rest of the day. Or, David and Goliath, yeah. You're thinking about it the rest of the day, aren't you? You think about those things, that's what really develops our belief. Okay, thank you very much. That was great.
Or sending a bird with a stone.
What's that?
Or sending a bird with a stone.
A bird and a stone?
Sending a bird with a stone.
I don't understand the first word you said there.
Sending a bird.
Sanding a bird with a stone? I don't remember that story. All right, thank you very much. That was excellent. Yeah, and we can go back to your original seats if you want. Especially Jeremy, because I want to sit back.